Hey everybody, Jason here. A couple of programming notes. This is an interview I did with Tristan Hall of Hall and Nothing Productions. He is here to advertise 1565 St. Elmo's Pay. The project is launching on October 4th, Friday, which is the day that this episode launches. So go ahead and go over to Kickstarter and check that project out. If it is not live by the time you hear this episode, then just go ahead and give it a couple of hours. The launch date should be October 4th, so go ahead and enjoy that. So a couple of things. First of all, we did the episode right after Tristan moved, so the sound quality is fairly poor. At least on his end, he's recording on an open air microphone on his laptop or tablet or something. So I like to keep things at a little bit at a higher standard. So just wanted to give people a heads up that that is happening. So, sorry about that. The second thing is the episode was going to be top 10 card games for 1 to 2 players, a low player count. Because of the madness, because of everything going on, Tristan is giving you his top 10 games with a low player count. I forgot the word card. I gave my, top card games. So the list that we talk about, the top 10 list that's coming, it's a little bit imbalanced, but you know what? We are keeping everything. It sounds good enough. We have a lot of good stuff for you. The episode's really long because we have some historical talk that is coming on the other side. So please go ahead and pick out whatever you enjoy. Really hope you enjoy the episode. Really hope it generates some feedback. So yeah, let me stop blabbing on to the show.
Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, where 2 busy dads get games to the table by any means necessary. Check us out, along with other great podcasts, at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 158. Top 10 games for a low player count. And 1565 St. Elmo's Pay with Tristan Hall. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, the podcast that helps you get your head in the game. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. We interrupt our parade through the hotness of GenCon and delivered Kickstarters. We have done a whole bunch of episodes just giving you piles and piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of games. But we are going to just step in there just for a little bit and bring you a little bit of a service over here. I got a very, very fun game here on Kickstarter, and I have a very interesting guest who's here to talk about his game as well as deliver what you want, which is a top 10 list of other games that you can go ahead and play. But this is the CEO and president of Hall or Nothing Productions. He is the full-time person that brings you fun games like Lifeform and Gloom and Killforth, and the new release that is hitting Kickstarter very, very soon. It is not out right now, but it will be hitting very, very soon. 1565 St. Elmo's Pay. We're going to get into all that with Tristan Hall. Welcome to the show, Tristan.
Hello there. Welcome.
Oh man, I'm the one up at 7 o'clock. What are you doing over there?
I need another coffee.
Actually, you
it's like when people say happy birthday to you and you say it back, like, oh yes, happy birthday.
You may be lapsing into your duties as a host. You also host the Board Chitless podcast.
Yes, that's a good cover. Yes. That's exactly what I'm
We are not on Board Chitless. We are on Every Night is Game Night, but I'm happy to have you on to talk about your latest project. So it is 1565 St. Elmo's Pay. We're going to be talking about in a second. But I guess, first, you've been on a couple of times, but, just in case people are not quite familiar with all the things that you do, maybe just give a little quick synopsis of who Tristan Hall is and what he is bringing to gamers' lives right now.
Oh, right. Okay. It's you kind of covered most of it already with what you said. I run a little publishing company in the UK called Hall and Nothing Productions, and we specialise in delivering thematic games. Yes. And it was kind of a pipe dream side project for me for a while there, a couple of years back, and then we was able to make the decision to go full time and run the company full time now about 2 years ago. So basically, my whole life is geekiness and games, which is fantastic. After working for other people in offices for 20 years, I finally found a job that I'm absolutely, ecstatic about pretty much every day of my life. So, we use Kickstarter as our primary source of funding for our games. So the one that you mentioned that we're coming up with soon, 1565 St. Elmo's Pay, is going to be our 6th Kickstarter, and we're dead excited about it. It sort of continues a tradition of historical card games that we want to create, following on from my second game, which was 1066 Tears to Many Mothers, where basically I wanted to create a non-collectible Magic the Gathering where every card is based on a real person from history and sort of shine a light on some of the epic battles of legend kind of thing. So, yeah, that's I've probably gone on with myself a little bit too much there, but that's kind of what I do. But yeah, Hollow Nothing Productions.
All right, so we are going to do this episode in 3 parts. The first part, we're going to talk a little bit about St. Elmo's Pay. As we said, it is a follow-up to 1066 Tears to Many Mothers, which we did review on the podcast a little while ago. Kind of card dueling, a game with historical features. And then we're going to get into the top 10 list. How I'm fashioning the top 10 list when it comes to a designer, as you heard with Adam and Brady Sadler, was let's do a top 10 list that kind of reflects on the project. Your influences, how some of the games that helped you design and, give you ideas so that you can kind of bring forth this new thing. And who doesn't love a top 10 list? That's going to be great. And then, so that'll be kind of the gaming content. And then at the end, and we'll definitely invite people to whether listen or not listen when it comes to that, because we're going to get into some of the historical background and, this game is soaked in its history, and so was 1066. So we'll probably get into a little bit of that as well. And I'm an amateur historian. Tristan over there is an amateur historian as well.
Absolutely, definitely.
We have that's how we refer to ourselves. We're going to, whenever you
don't get to have any further qualifications than amateur.
Exactly. We love this stuff. We're always watching,
Vikings.
Yeah, right? Oh yeah, we're always watching like historical shows, and we're always watching, reading stuff and everything. So we're gonna geek out about that a little bit. So, all right. So let us get to St. Elmo's Pay. So it is a card dueling game. I guess I'll just start with 1066. So because that gives context to what St. Elmo's Pay is. So 1066. I always like to say when people ask that, if the Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones was in a card game, that would be it.
Nice. I like that analogy.
Because not a lot of Game of Thrones fans out there, but if you are a Game of Thrones fan, you kind of know exactly what I'm talking about. So you can do war in many different ways. You could do, big skirmish battles. You could do kind of, multi-theater events. There's a lot of ways you can kind of crack that nut. What Tristan's game is doing is, especially 1066, I've not played the new game, but you have 2 sides, and they have decided to just throw the gauntlet down, and this is it. We're going to fight over a certain battle, and it's depicted by these kind of wedge cards, and then your decks are basically just meat that you're just going to throw cards into a 3x3 grid, 9 cards, and your cards are going to die. You're going to have awesome cards, and they're going to die. And they're just going to throw cards. And whoever can do that most tactically, whoever can combo most things along the way are going to win. So it's a very kind of claustrophobic, suffocating experience, but in a good way, because it's evocative of the kind of pitched battle, fight for every single inch that you can get kind of war that that was, a feature of war when it came to big throwdown battles. So I'm guessing, because I remember we talked about it at the time, and that's that was kind of what you were going for, that kind of claustrophobic, closed-in feel. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you nailed the description there beautifully. I
don't want to make you do too much work, my friend. You just moved.
I just turn up. I just nod and agree with what you say. But yeah, no, 1565 absolutely follows on from 1066 to such an extent that it's actually compatible. It's backwards compatible with 1066 Tears to Many Mothers. So the game mechanics are fundamentally the same, but it's designed to be as quickly as accessible as possible. So like with 1066, you grab your deck, you shuffle it, and off you go. There's no deck building, there's no deck construction. So there's no sort of barrier to entry in terms of getting up and running, and it plays again, 30 to 40 minutes. You can sort of battle through it on your lunch break kind of thing. But what I also try to build into the very first sort of experience of playing it is, as you mentioned there, the history. So each of the cards in the game is based on a real person or a real event, and there's some painstakingly researched flavor text on every single card in the game, explaining who that person was, or why that particular battle took place, or what that objective represents, kind of thing. And so it's a great opportunity for me to sort of bury my head back in the history books with a highlighter pen and go through and research battles that are of interest, that I might have known a little bit about, but then want to sort of drill down deeper and find out who are the principal protagonists, who's the story about, and try and sort of siphon those narrative moments from the battles and find a way to insert them into the card game. And as soon as you start doing that, or as soon as I start doing that, it triggers ideas of like how that card or that person or that event might be represented mechanically in the game. So, for example, in the Siege of Malta, there was lots of artillery. So we've got new card types in this game. There's artillery cards that will shoot and fire through every single card in a column, kind of thing. And just those sort of little notions of how the battles changed from 1066 over to 1565, and the new units and the new characters and stuff, really helps and dovetails nicely with the mechanics of the game, because it's not a massively complex game, and you can just sort of dive straight into it. And so I've tried not to change too much of the fundamental mechanics, but each card in the game gives you a way of breaking that system and adding its own new thing. The Battle of Hastings in 1066 was fought over 3 sort of wedges of troops. And as it happens, the Siege of Malta was fought over 3 frontiers as well, 3 fortresses. So we've been able to even keep that sort of set up. But those fortresses varied in value and in strength. So each of those has a different value in this game. St. Elmo's, the doomed fortress on the top of Mount Sibras, historically went first. So that has like a lower strength in the game than, for example, Berger and Senglia, which are the other 2 frontiers that it was fought over. So it's just been a sort of a fantastic opportunity for me to geek out over history and follow a system that it caught people's imaginations. We sold out of 1066, so this game is going to dovetail with the second print run of Taste of Many Months. And
okay, so you can get both games as a package during this Kickstarter.
That's the plan, yeah. Originally, I wasn't going to offer that, but then when 1066 sold out and the requests started sort of stacking up for it, I realised that it's just another way to sort of draw attention to the campaign and hopefully draw people in. So,
sure.
And since they are the same system, then yeah, it makes no sense not to, I suppose. So it's the second game design that I did after Gloomy Kilford, and it's been great to sort of return to that game design and try and breathe new life into it, and find new ways to approach it, and also take on the feedback from players who played 1066 and the things that they wanted to see in it, and have that input from the players as well. So yeah, it's one that I'm really excited about, and also we're at a stage now as a company where we've been gathering the artwork beforehand. So one of our big things is we have an insane amount of art in our games, and it takes lots of time for art to develop all of that. So
I remember, Tristan, you wrote an article, either a blog post or a Twitter post or something, about how with Gloom and Killforth, you did all these unique art assets, and you're like, never again. And then here you are. You can't help yourself, man. Someone get this man an intervention.
Please do that.
The art is crazy in your games, like realistic, but not cheesy. Like a photo reel or whatever it is. Just you play a Hollow Nothing game, any Hollow Nothing game, especially your card games. I mean, you are going to be in for a delight for your senses, and I can only see the harried, exhausted person who has to put all that together behind it.
Well, luckily we've got a whole team now internationally, so we kind of share the load. But yeah, I mean, for me it's super important for the games to look as good as they can. I want them to be able to sit alongside like Star Wars titles and Lord of the Rings titles and hold their own. For me, as a gamer, that's one of the things that will turn me on or off a game. I will pick up a box and buy a game in a shop based on how gorgeous the artwork is. I'm an art whore in that respect. And similarly, it will put me off. There are great games that it's taken me a long time to come round to, because for one reason or another I wasn't a fan of the art or the graphic design, the style kind of thing. So it's something I'm super conscious of, that we've set our stall, we have to have brilliant artists. And I think for something like this as well, where you're trying to shine a light on a dark historical period, I think it's really important to try and capture a sense of that and give the players a sense of like delving into a bit of what it might have been like, and who these people were. I mean, obviously there were no iPhones around 500 years ago, so most of it is conjecture, but we send our artists books with the armour and the clothing of the time, so that they've got like reference material to try and dress the characters appropriately and stuff. And whilst we allow for a certain amount of artistic license, we want the games to be as realistic as possible, so make sure that they have the right sort of helmets and guns and...
All right, so let us get to our top 10 list. We are going to shout out our friends over at Low Player Count, Donnie and Travis, who don't post a lot of episodes anymore, but we're hopeful. We love them, and we are hopeful to carry forward the spirit of Low Player Count here at Every Night is Game Night as we go through some content that is specific for the people who love those low player count games. We have a top 10 list since St. Elmo's Pay and Tis Many Mothers are both games for 1 to 2 players. We have 10 more games for 1 to 2 players that may or may not have influenced the design of St. Elmo's Pay. Top 10 lists are fun. I have top 10 games as well for low player count. I love cards, so I kind of specialize in cards. But Tristan's like, you know what? I'm going to do whatever I want. So top 10 low player count games for 1 to 2 players. So we are going to start with number 10. How do they say that in the Dice Tower? Number 10. Something like that.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to say this is number 10, but I didn't put them in specific order to allow myself the flexibility to change the order. But I'm going to open with Scythe in the number 10 spot.
Scythe.
Yeah, it's so obviously not a card game, but in terms of like an inspiration, it is a game that I think is beautifully designed, but also beautifully presented, and the world building of the artists is present throughout the game. The sort of the mesh of the Euro mechanics in the wood with the like thematic mechanics in plastic, the actual player boards, everything about it is so beautifully presented. For me, it's like a hallmark of like how a game should feel and how a game should look. And it's got that great sort of alternate sort of steampunk World War One vibe, which is just I think it's the first game to really do it justice in the way that it has.
Do you prefer like a 2-player intimate game, or do you prefer just kind of sitting there with the automa and duking it out?
Yeah, so in terms of low player counts, I think it is great as a 2-player versus game, but now, even if I did play it 2 players, we would tend to put the automas in as well.
Right.
And as a solo game, yeah, I've absolutely spammed the heck out of it. to the point where when we did last time we played a multiplayer game, they kind of ganged up on me because they're like, well, you've played against the automa, too many times now, so you've got too much experience. So they sort of went after me. This is fair, I suppose. But yeah, it's the solo rules take a while to sort of process. There's like an 8-page booklet that comes with it, but I think it's Morten Munrad Pedersen and his team, the Automa Factory, who put those rules together, and it's just brilliant. It takes away, once you have processed it, it takes away all the sort of bother of having to run a second player. You get the effects of what that player would have done, rather than having to think about what that AI player's turn should have been.
Right.
And that was definitely a factor in the design for the solo play for 1066, which is the same for 1565 as well, to create an AI that runs smoothly enough that it gives you a sense of what it'd be like to play against another player without the sort of real estate or upkeep of you having to imagine what that player should be doing. Like playing chess by yourself and trying to sort of think of the best move for it. You don't have to have that. You don't have that sort of mental real estate. You just play the game, you flip a card, and the AI does its thing. And so yeah, that's something we've borrowed heavily from for the solo design for 1066 and 1565.
My number 10 game, not going to go on about it too much because it is a placeholder for another game. My number 10 game is Arkham Horror LCG. I do not own Arkham Horror LCG. I've not played a whole bunch of Arkham Horror LCG. I don't have a lot of people in my ambit who have it. But I love it. I want to play more of it, but it's Arkham. So I'm not going to play too much more of it because it's Arkham, and I'm not a big Arkham fan. But I am looking forward to Marvel Champions LCG, which is the next LCG that is coming. Oh my God. If that is anything close to what I hope it is, that may be the thing that takes all my money. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's already on pre-order for me. And the most exciting thing about that is being able to play it with my little one, my 9-year-old, because he's a massive Marvel Cinematic Universe fan. So I cannot wait for him to be Black Panther or Captain America is his favorite, and it can be Spider-Man alongside him.
Absolutely. I can't wait for it. I hope it's good. So placeholder on my list. All right, so let's get to number 9.
Okay, so for me, it was a tough choice between Legendary Encounters, an Alien deck building game, or the Predator deck building game.
Really?
And
wow.
I went with.
That's the first time I've heard that. Like, people usually think that Predator is kind of a notch below Alien.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I prefer the theme of Alien, and for the low player count, the solo and co-op modes, Alien gives you 4 scenarios because it's got 4 movies. And then that's expanded out with the expansions. They've got like the hard versions of each movie. But the Predator deck building game has the better system. The mechanics are just more polished. There's brothers in arms and call for backup kind of things, where it makes it more cooperative, and it feels more polished as an experience without sort of compromising on the difficulty. And it's so much so, in fact, that they transferred the sort of composition of the decks from Predator back into Alien to make it a bit more balanced. But to be fair, nothing gives you the same experience as running around, the Solarco or LV-426. You just can't get that Predator.
All right, so that was Legendary Encounters. Pick your version. They're all pretty good. I actually like the encounter system a little bit better than the regular Legendary.
Definitely.
Yeah. So my number 9 is actually a brand new hotness. I'm succumbing to the brand new hotness. We haven't even reviewed this game yet on Every Night's Game Night. Looking forward to it. I need to get more plays first, but it is Edge of Darkness. Speaking of Kickstarter, did you see this one on Kickstarter when it was on?
I saw it at GenCon and I felt the weight of the box.
Oh my God.
It's huge.
They can't even sell it at retail. I think it's going to be one of them Kickstarter only things. It may be on as we're posting the episode already on Kickstarter, or at least it's going to be soon for an expansion for it. I love it. It is so good. And I did not like Mystic Veil. It felt like more like a pile of mechanisms rather than a real game. So it's a card crafting system. If people don't know, you have a cellophane sleeve with one little power, and then as you go, you can buy these cards, plastic cards that fit in the sleeve, and you kind of buff the original card. So it solves the problem that a lot of deck builders have, where the base cards are just kind of cruddy, and then you either have to cull them, or you're stuck with them, or whatever. It's just kind of a management thing that, you don't, at the end game, you don't want to have to manage that stuff. With Edge of Darkness, you're building those cards kind of more synthetically. Mystic Veil just had that, so I wasn't impressed by it. Edge of Darkness adds a whole bunch of other stuff. You're fighting monsters. You kind of have this central row of things that you're crafting. Like you kind of you can draft other people's cards out of the central row, which is kind of one of the things about it at a cost. They add so much stuff to it that this had to be the original game. And then they said, okay, let's just, while we make this big monstrosity, let's just release Mystic Veil. I think that is close to the story that happened. Like, okay, that the original game was Edge of Darkness. I really like it. There's a solo mode to it, and it's very easy to run and easy to play. I cannot wait to play more of this. I'm maybe a little bit premature to put this on a top 10 list of low player count games, but man, I really, really dig it.
I look forward to giving it a try.
All right, so let us get to number 8. Low player count games.
Okay, for number 8, I've got Labyrinth, The War on Terror.
Whoa! Okay, well, not whoa. We're talking about war games over here, so cool.
Yeah, it's probably one of the densest games systems to sort of process. It's well, war gamers, to be fair, would argue against that. But I think for someone who just picks up a game off the shelf and wants to give a two-player game a go, it's very complex. And learning the solo rules for it is as complex again. It's like learning the game all over again, and you've got to follow bot sort of flow charts to make everything work, which is complex. And every time I play it, it feels like starting again.
Right.
But once you get through that, it provides a really unique experience and a real sort of nail-biting battle for the fate of modern day Middle East, basically. And it's again really heavily researched. The guy who designed it, Volko Runko, I think he worked for the CIA, and it really delivers, and it's really steeped in the history. Every card in the game again is based on a real event, and the way that they trigger each round will either provide you like a benefit, but with something negative happening to you at the same time, or you can use it for a lesser value, but without the negative effect. And it always has this sort of crucial, what do you call it? It's like a dynamic where you've got to choose, between one horrible thing happening to you or a different kind of horrible thing happening to you. And just
Sophie's Choice or something?
Say again, sorry.
Like a Sophie's Choice?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Not to get too dark, but
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a pretty bleak theme, to be fair, but yeah, and that sort of escalates as the game goes on. So it's brilliantly designed, very not easy to access, not as easy to pick up as like a deck builder, but fantastic, and looks great on the table. GMT do a brilliant job on the sort of production values as well.
all right, I've never played it. I'm intimidated by GMT. I need someone to kind of guide me along, hold my hand.
Yeah, I wish I'd had someone to do that for me as well.
But you fought through, and you were rewarded for your experience.
Yes, for sure.
Absolutely. So I'm going to get to a much simpler game, getting my realm a little bit. Hero Realms. So Hero Realms, I chose it over Star Realms. I actually like the Star Realms kind of balance of attacking and defending. The numbers seem a little bit more kind of in line, where Hero Realms is more like the attack numbers are huge. So like you put something out, it's like bam, 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 bam. It's much more of a rock'em sock'em thing. So it's like I go back and forth with that, but the theme is better. Obviously, I'm a big fantasy guy, not as much of a sci-fi guy. And co-op mode, story mode. There's more campaign coming from a delivered Kickstarter that's happening later in the year. It's just if I just want a very quick. I can't play Gloom of Killforth, Tristan. It's too long. I can't just I want an adventure game quickly for an evening. I'm going to lay out a Gloom of Killforth. Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? When you don't want to do that, I recommend that, by the way. Play Gloom of Killforth. It's really good. But when you don't want to do all of that, you just want a smaller experience that delivers 85% of what that is, Hero Realms is definitely your bet.
Agreed. It's a great game, and I prefer the fantasy theme. Although we did battle through the entire campaign, I think, in one sitting.
Which is not the worst thing in the world.
It's not the worst thing, but it made us less inclined to go back to it. Because it's like, okay, we've done that now.
Absolutely, you're right. All right, so now we're on to number 7. What is your number 7 low player count game, Tristan?
I have the 7 Continent.
Whoa! There's people who put 7 Wonders as their number 7 on every other list.
I don't know. It probably should be higher up the list. Like I said, I wasn't massively thinking about the order here, but in terms of uniqueness and just the ambition of it, I think it definitely deserves a spot in the top 10. The design, the layout of the map is gorgeous as it unfolds. I love the fact that you have to they provide a magnifying glass with the game so you can look at the cards to see if you can see any secret paths printed on the island as you go. Mechanically, I'm not as big a fan of it. It's like your life is your deck, but the deck isn't as snappy and as interesting as deck building games and stuff. But
right.
The fact that you've got just 100 hours of island to explore, and I don't think I ever got further than 20 hours in, but it's one of those ones that I want to go back to. I want to pick it back up and get properly stuck into it. And there was just nothing else like it, and I don't think there has been since. So yeah, a beautifully ambitious game, and a paean to like sort of fighting fantasy game books, which I was a massive fan of as a kid as well.
Absolutely. I got stuck at the beginning with that big first mission and have never gone back. It sounds like they made a lot of improvements with the second printing and different scenarios and everything. So I don't have a lot of people in my life that have it. I don't have it, but it's one of those of like it's gone from I had my opinion, but now it's kind of incomplete because there's a bunch of different things that have happened with the design since then. So looking forward to maybe. I always put out a call to listeners, anybody that just wants to grab me at a convention or at a local place and, hey, you have to check this out again. Someone actually did that.
100-hour game.
And they tried that with Xenoshift with me because I did not like Xenoshift at all. And I had like I posted on a geek list and I had my opinion and they're like, oh, I noticed you didn't like Xenoshift. I'm going to show you like all the improvements that were made, blah, blah, blah. And we did it. And I still don't like it, but but they tried, and it was fun.
I played it on the app. It seemed good on the app, but I didn't stick with it. So something must have put me off.
Right. All right. So that was number 7, the Seventh Continent. My number 7. This seems to be a trend here, Tristan. You give some like big honking game, and I got some little tiny. What does it say about me?
Well, this is why you're not ready to set up Bloom Kill Force all the time.
I know, right? I don't have the capacity. So I have the Castles of Burgundy card game. So if people know anything about me, I'm a thematic gamer. What is Castles of Burgundy doing on my list? I still like a good strategic nut to crack every once in a while. That's manageable. And obviously Castles of Burgundy is the board game, and it's good. I like it, but I love the fact that the card game boils like a really huge percentage of that game down, and it fits in a magic card box. Like I walk around with it. I can just lay it out, play a solo game. The solo bot is very clever because it's so simple. It's just like scoring thresholds, but it's still kind of a jerk because it could cheat and has a little bit of personality to it. Obviously, the multiplayer game is satisfying too. I'm still playing it. Like this has been 3-4 years now. I'm still playing Castle Burgundy card game. Little satisfying, little solo. I really like it.
Nice. I'm going to add it to my wish list.
There you go. No. Are you? Because I know you're a thematic gamer, and I know Hall and Nothing specialize in thematic games. How much do you get into those like just pure Euros and pure just strategy type things?
When I saw, going back about 10-15 years on Board Game Geek, Agricola was hovering at the number 1 spot just forever. So I was like, all of my games are about goblins and monsters and whatever else. And I thought, I'm going to have to pick up a Euro and just see what it's all about. And so I picked up the medieval farming game and got absolutely hooked. And I loved it. I loved the cleanness of the mechanics.
Nice.
I loved the fairness of it. And it was playing those Euro games, and I did go on to collect a lot more as well. My wife and I played Viticulture. It's probably our favourite game to sit and play together over a glass of wine.
The game really just invites it. It's like, okay, just go get wine while you play this.
But the fairness and the quickness of the turns, with the Euro, it's like I take a turn, you take a turn, I take a turn, and that's something that hugely influenced me for Gloom and Killforth. It's an action point game. I take an action, you take an action. And I loved that, just sort of scooting around the table. Everybody just gets a quick go, but it gives you a bigger sense of what's happening and building a story with it. So, I pinched liberally from Euro games over time. And I think, the perfect game sits between the elegance of a Euro and the theme of, a thematic game.
Yeah, I find that, there's a lot of trade-offs there, right? So, when you say, I want a streamlined thing, and I want a streamlined thing, you could streamline the theme right out of a game.
Correct, yeah, you can pare it down almost completely, and some Euros do that. And we have played some where I'm just like, this doesn't have to be about, trading horses. This could literally be anything, and you wouldn't feel any different. And I think once you've got to that point, you have gone too far. Right. So, yeah, I think there's a middle ground, definitely, for keeping the theme, keeping a thematic narrative adventure, but also having a clean, fair, or at least a fair feeling mechanic that gives everybody an even chance.
All right, so I ambushed the top 10 list a little bit with a little sidebar. Sorry about that, guys.
I'm sure we talk about games.
How dare we talk about games in a gaming list? Let us get back to the business at hand. Number 6.
Okay, I've gone for Spirit Island.
Ooh, there we go.
So this is one of the games, I know we were talking before the podcast about art and stuff, and I think the art put me off this for quite a while. It put me off because it seemed like it was sort of a throwaway family game, sort of in the style of, like Candyland or something like that. And I just, the colours were garish, the map board isn't great. In fact, I would go so far as to say it's not nice. It looks like a sort of 4 different palettes from like paint, from the program paint, and it's just visually I find it very unappealing, but the gameplay is brilliant. It's fantastic, and it's a unique theme. You're playing as the spirits of an island, defending it from oncoming conquistadors, and the card play in it is fantastic. You can play fast cards and slow cards, and each of them has a different sort of tactical effect, and it builds you throughout the game through sort of agonizing resource-based decisions to like preparing for massive moves where you can wipe out tons of bad guys across the map. And that feeling of empowerment once it kicks in, once you pulled off a great move and destroyed a couple of cities, is brilliant. It's a really great cooperative experience.
Do you play, when you play solo, do you play with one spirit or 2?
Well, I've only played it solo a couple of times so far, and each time I've only played with 1 because that's enough for me to try to wrap my head around. But unfortunately, it means you only get 1 piece of island, which is a very small board. When you've got like the full board, makes it look like a proper game, whereas when you've just got like 1 piece of island, it looks like this tiny part of a game. And I've read reports from people who say you have to play multiple spirits so that you can combo across them and all that stuff. But I just, with solo games, I just like to play with 1 character, or one sort of unit sort of thing.
It's funny you mention that because we're having a conversation over on the One Stop Co-op Shop Slack. Thank you for giving me that in to advertise a little bit. So we do have a Slack channel. I don't know if use Slack in your personal business transactions or anything.
No.
Nope, no Slack for you.
No slacking.
No slacking. Too busy. Actually, it's funny that it's called Slack because there's a lot of notifications that come in and it like really decreases your productivity. So, but we had so there's a lot of people, a lot of co-op fans, solo fans, and we're talking about like what solo gamers prefer. Do you prefer, like, does a publisher need to say that my game is solo and you're only playing 1 character? Do I have to specify that, or can I say this is a co-op game, you can play it solo, 1, 2, 3 characters or whatever, or just like leave it there? Or there's something really valuable about like, communicating to the consumer that this is a 1 character experience,
Yeah, it's as a player, I definitely value that pure solo play, because the amount of games that are like, fully soloable, and you get it, and it's like, just play as 4 characters, and it doesn't feel like it's catering for you at all. It just feels like,
right.
You could do that, I suppose, if you wanted to. That's how you do it. It's like an afterthought. And even like ones where it goes, you only have to play as 2 characters. For me, that's still, you're not sort of getting into the spirit of the game if you're not representing a person kind of thing. I always prefer to play as 1 hero in those kinds of games if possible. But almost invariably, like the dudes on a map type games, very rarely go below 2 heroes. I did try playing a Shadows of Brimstone adventure with 1 cowboy, and he's got murdered. So for me, I think it's important to at least try to find a way to offer that. And then, of course, you will get the kickback from solo players who love playing as multiple characters, and in fact love finding combos across. If I play as 4 guys, I can do this, and this, and I can build my whole D&D party kind of thing. So I think having the option to offer play as 1 character or 1 spirit or whatever, I think for me that's important. But I can see why publishers would just get to the point of saying, look, you can totally play it solo because you just use 4 dudes or whatever. And in effect, that's true. So
yeah, it's easier. I mean, like,
risk of not committing either way.
The difference between playing 1 and playing 2 is so huge. It's so much bigger the difference between 2 and 3. Because with 2, there's a multiplier effect where you can get those combos going and it kind of gets the balance in. Or even like something silly like a deck builder. I have a Tableau deck builder thing later in the list. And when you're playing 2 characters, you can kind of get that market moving and like things move and things happen. And I can bounce things off each other. When I'm playing with 1, everything stops in certain designs. And you have to account for that in the design and put extra time into your game to enable the 1 character experience. So if your game is not built from the ground up for 1, then it's actually surprisingly difficult, I would think.
Yeah. Well, it can be, especially... Well, you've got to decide, haven't you, from the outset, are you building it for a one-player experience, or are you building it as a multiplayer experience, or are you going to, from the outset, from the very first design, try and scale it so that all of those experiences are catered for? I know from our point of view, as a huge fan of solo games, I've tried to make sure all of our games have a solo play option, and how that's catered for will vary depending on the type of game that it is. So in Gloomy Killforth, you set up, there's no change. It's exactly the same game. You just have 1 dude. You can play as multiple characters if you want, but it will completely not change the game at all if you play as 1 character. Whereas in something like 1066 Tears to Many Mothers or 1565 St. Elmo's Pay, we have to develop a small booklet of solo rules. It's only like 4 pages, but it allows the bot player, the AI player, to give you that sense of a thinking, breathing opponent. And then the only other option that I can think of is one that we did for Lifeform, which is it wasn't designed for solo play at all. It was a 2 to 4 player game, but I had a long conversation with Mark Chaplin, the designer, and convinced him that we should build a solo expansion so that people can play it as 1 hero running around, this giant spaceship. And so he spent months pouring his creative energy into developing a bespoke solo expansion, which takes the base game and expands it to create this personalized solo player experience. So we've literally run the gamut of all the ways that you can offer solo play in the game.
All right, so the next game that I have, my number 6 on the list, is actually my only game on my top 10 that does not solo, and I don't want it to solo. And it's the game that is closest to St. Elmo and Tales to Many Mothers. The old Reiner Knizia game, Battle Line. I think that this is called, Schottentotten? Something like that? I don't know if you know anything about that.
I only heard of Battle Lines, and that somebody once, an early playtester of 1066, said, this is like Battle Lines, but I've never actually played it.
Really? I'm shocked by that, because there's a lot that's similar.
Really?
Yeah, it's a Knizia game, so it's really super distilled and simple and everything, but it's a line, and you have to control, like in Tears to Many Mothers, you have to control 2 of 3 wedges. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I imagine Elmo's Pay is the same. We're like, okay, if you get 2 of the 3 areas, then that's how you win.
That's how you win, yeah.
So there's more. I think there's 10 spots here, but you have to get a majority of these spots, and your troops are basically like poker hands. So you're building your troops in your line, and you're trying to build a 3-card hand or a 4-card hand, and then this hand has a straight, and this hand has a flush. A flush beats a straight. They call it something different. They call it formations, but come on. We see you, Reiner Knizia. You put random words in there. You didn't mean those. But that's what you're doing. So you're playing cards one at a time, and there's special cards that kind of make things wild. And you once you're playing into a certain thing, you're looking at the board, going, okay, they're building up this flush over there. Is that a feint? Is that not a feint? I think they're building a flush. So I'm going to build over here, and it really is this kind of this looking at, okay, which areas can I conquer? And it gets me in that very similar strategic headspace as Tears to Many Mothers did. I'm very, very surprised. Go play that game right now. Go play Battle Line right now. If I'm going to play a 2-player game and 2-player only game, that's probably going to be the one. It really is.
I'm gonna have to add that to my wish list as well. I'm making a running list now.
You've made 2 games in that same system. This is beyond wish list stuff, my friend.
This is the world we're in now. You think you come up with a unique idea, and already thousands of people have already done it.
All right, so that was the only 2-player only game on the list. Everything else is solo and 2-player. So that's Battle Line. All right, we've gotten to the top 5. We're only like an hour into the list. I really hope that people are vibing with what we're doing over here. Anyway, so number 5, hit me with some. Actually, you because you're just kind of like messing around with the list. So this is not your top 5 one-to-player games. He's just like the last of the list, right?
Last 5. Although I do rate them all very highly, and I think a few of these top 5 would be my actual top 5.
Absolutely.
So, let's just say it counts for today.
Cool. All right, number 5.
So I had to have a Dudes on a Map game because I've got so many of them, and I was trying to pare it down from all of the ones on my shelf, and I came to Fireteam Zero.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the theme for me is an absolute win. Weird War 2, a bunch of elite special forces behind enemy lines fighting the enemy, and in this case the enemy happens to be mutant, monster, undead, alien, grizzly, demon things. And the miniatures are great, the maps are brilliant, but the gameplay is fantastic. You each have like a bespoke deck of cards depending on the character type, whether you're a sniper or a demolitions expert. And you're running around the map. You can't just clear a room. The enemies just keep coming at you. So it's about managing these waves and waves of bad guys whilst trying to achieve the objectives of whichever map it is. And the objectives are really sort of thematic events that happen throughout the course of the game. And it just speaks to me on a fundamental dice rolling, monster bashing level with great theme and great art.
Mm-hmm. That's a co-op, right?
It is, yeah. And it's one where if you wanted to play it solo, you'd have to play as 2 guys.
You forgive it.
Yeah, I forgive it. The only other the second place contender was going to be one of the like Zombicide Black Plague or Zombicide Invaders, just because that's the one I play so much with my son. My little one loves these ones because they capture his imagination so much. And Zombicide just has like the path of least resistance in terms of like simplicity. It's simple to play, elegant sort of design. I mean, I say elegant. It gets quite clunky once the zombies start.
Yes, it is not elegant. I was going to say.
Less options. I was thinking about when we were talking about Mac League Cop before, and you can only do 3 or 4 things at each turn, and it's the same in Zombicide. But no, I think Fireteam Zero just achieves the same objectives, but does them with much greater depth of gameplay and story.
And a lot of flair. I'm glad you mentioned that one. I've been meaning to track that one down. I don't know if that's an active product right now, but we'll see. All right, so my game, my number 5 game, was my favorite game last year. It is a game that I play to relax. I think there's a game that's coming in here that is going to knock that off in terms of relaxation game, but we'll see. But it is Sunset Over Water. Sunset Over Water is from Pencilverse Games, Dr. Steve Finn, Keith Matika on the solo. You are collecting beautiful paintings, so you're not destroying alien mutants. You're doing the opposite of...
It's easier to destroy than it is to create.
Path of least resistance over here. So you're just a little meeple guy, and you're running. You walk around, and the solo mode is very, very clever. It reimagines the game. Speaking of like different approaches to solo, some solo kind of just plops on top of the game. There's one of the solo modes that reimagines what you have to do, but keeps the kind of the soul of the game together. I thought it was great. It's very relaxing. I still play it. So that is Sunset Over Water. All right, so number 4. We are getting to the cream of the cream over here. What is your number 4?
Okay, we are getting to the cream of the cream. This is one of my favourite games, and I'm wondering if it should maybe be at the top spot, but here it is.
Doesn't it feel like you cheated on somebody when you rank something too low? Don't worry, I still love you.
Yeah, the Lord of the Rings, the card game. It was a choice between this or the Arkham Horror living card game, which you mentioned earlier as well. And I love what they've done with the Arkham Horror living card game, the way they've updated it, the system, and they've pared it down so you play as one character. But the Lord of the Rings, just the theme for me edges out everything, and the way that they've gone into such fine minutiae of detail throughout all of these card sets. The art is peerless. The gameplay gets more and more complex as time goes on, and it is difficult to come back to if you've abandoned it for a while, because you have to go through the deck construction and find your way back in, and the deck that you made last time round won't compete against the newer expansions and stuff, but just the sheer scale of it and just the gigantic love letter to Tolkien that it is, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my biggest barrier with that is that you have to play with multiple characters.
Yeah,
and it becomes a lot. It really it becomes a lot. Not in terms of like it's a lot of math.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is. And at the end, at the end of the game, when you look down at like 30 different characters spread across your side of the table, it's crazy. It's like you built an army. But the journey of getting to that point and everything is just it's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. So I have another IP game. It's my number 4. This is kind of a forgotten game. I don't hear a lot about it. They dripped about a couple of expansions and moved on. But this is the Dresden Files cooperative card game. Yes, my number 4 low player count game. I love this game as a solo. It is a very fantastic. I think with Lord of the Rings, same thing. I don't think I'd love it as much without the IP. If this was just
pick up the IP first, yeah.
Yeah, that matters. I'm shallow.
That's allowed. You're allowed to like the things that you like.
Absolutely. And it's like, it gives me entry into a very clever, quick puzzle game. I think this wouldn't be as high also without the app. I played hundreds of games of the app. Just like, throw on some random, Harry and 2 investigators versus some random scenario. And they're all book-based. I've read all the books multiple times. And this is not a thematic experience in the sense of like, I don't feel like I'm playing through the game, but it reminds me of fun times and reading about the kooky stuff that happens. And it's just, you can just pound out a game in 5 minutes. And in the physical game, it takes a little bit longer because you got to shuffle tokens around. But I mean, in terms of just a very, very quick dip into a world that makes me really, really happy. I'm a puzzle guy anyway. I love Sudokus and Kukuros and everything. This one just hits me right in my sweet spot. That is Dresden Files cooperative card game. Are you a big kind of like, because there's like the big IPs, right? The Harry Potters and the Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff. Do you ever get to that second level of fantasy IPs and geek IPs that you really enjoy?
Not as often as I'd like. I think a lot of my sort of geek days as a kid were spent reading Forgotten Realms, D&D books.
Yes.
And I invested so much in that it was great at the time, but looking back is a kind of insular perspective into the wider world of fantasy reading that's out there. Mm-hmm. So I liked Terry Brooks, Shannara and stuff like that. But I've not kept up to date with newer stuff except through TV shows. Even with Game of Thrones, I read the first book, but in reading the book, I was like, I just had all the characters from the TV show in my head, so I was like, I'm just going to watch the TV show instead. Which is a heresy, I know, but only so much time in your life.
I mean, at least the TV show ended. It may not have been the best ending that people wanted. It may have actually been a crappy ending. What did you think of that?
I was glad that it ended. There's a few shows that sort of build up and then wrap up, and there was that, and The Wire, and I think everything else just went on as far as it could until it got cancelled or everybody had left. So right. It was just nice to get a conclusion to the story. Whether or not people were happy with it, I don't really care, because the biggest complaint about it was that it was all happening too quickly. Yeah, and the whole thing was, we spent 7 seasons doing nothing. So that nothing happened. So from my point of view, I loved it. I was glad to see it wind up and not sort of dangle are we going to get another season? And have a cliffhanger episode. No, just give me the end.
That's it. Move on my life. All right, so we are now to our top 3s. Number 3 for top 10 low player count games.
Okay, and again, probably a contender for number 1 spot, but Major Knight the board game. So it tops out every sort of solo board games list, and rightfully so. It's absolutely brilliantly designed. It doesn't do as well in multiplayer, and I would never play it with more than 2, I don't think, just in terms of the time investment. But the card play, the deck building, the map exploration, the maths, because there's a lot of maths going into working out how to assault cities. It's just it's peerless in what it does. I wouldn't call it a thematic game as such, because it doesn't really, for me, it doesn't tell as great a story. It's mostly just attacking stuff and stealing treasure. But the way that you go about doing it was completely unique until sort of Gloomhaven came along and lifted the card play elements of it. But it's a fantastic experience, and every single time I get it out to play it, I'm rewarded with that same sort of enthusiasm that I had for it the first time I played it. In fact, probably more so because the first time I played it, I couldn't get my head around it. It took about 3 games to find out what was going on with it. But now that I do, every time I pick it up and set it up, I'm like, why am I not playing this every day? It's amazing.
Right. All right. So just to kind of specify my number 3, my whole list in general, I kind of try to focus on card games where Tristan is bringing the thunder, which is perfectly fine. We're talking about games over here, so hopefully you guys are happy. But my number 3 low player card game, I have not gotten enough of this, and I actually have you to thank, Tristan, because I put up a thread in the One Player Guild about what are the solo games that people are looking forward to at GenCon, and you mentioned this game, and I'm not sure if you played it or you just saw it looked interesting, but Mageling.
Oh yes, no, I sat down with the designer unwittingly. We were having a beer on the strip and just got chatting to this guy and enthusing about games. I think a third party introduced us or something, and he just pulled out his game and said, "Oh, here, I'd love you to give it a try sometime," and just passed me a copy of what turned out to be Mageling. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's one of those that ties the theme and the mechanics quite beautifully in a neat little game. But I'm speaking on your behalf. You tell us, Jason, what you like about it.
No, it's good. We just had an episode very recently where I just went gaga over this game. Don't have to go over it too much, but it's a kind of a adventure dice game, card based, some dice. Kind of think one deck dungeon, but a little bit less on the dice manipulation, a little bit more on that kind of sense of journey and adventure, and the comboing plays out in a different way, but it's still satisfying. Oh. All you had to do was say, okay, a more thematic, slightly like, I say thematic, that's such a weird thing because it's not thematic. It's not like I feel like whatever, but it just immerses me more. It gives me it tickles my imagination a little bit more. Like when it comes to a game, I don't need a game to like grab me and immerse me. I just need it to point me in the right direction. Just don't fight me. and give me enough to play with where I'll just kind of like do whatever I need to do. And One Deck Dungeon was a festival of math at the end of the day. It's satisfying and fun. But this one does a little bit more to give me that sense of like I'm progressing through a land and, building up my power. And the dice are very satisfying and fun. And the combos are good. And it's very different ways to win every single time. It's upstairs on my desk right now. It is my go-to at night when I don't want to play on my phone. Just bang something out quick game. I love it. So that is Mageling. Love it.
Fantastic. And great art too.
Yep. All right. So we are to our number 2. Let's go for our number 2, low player count games. I can't believe. So you've already knocked off Lord of the Rings, Mage Knight, Spirit Island. I mean, what is left?
Okay. Well, number 2 spot for me here today is Kingdom Death Monster.
I should have known. It's Tristan Hall, of course. How could that be number 1?
It could be. We've gone past about 3 that could have been number 1 so far.
Yeah.
Ultimate sort of ridiculous game and a complete sort of pipe dream from the designer Adam Poots. The world building in it is epic, and it's his paying to Warhammer Quest, and there's a lot for me. There's a huge barrier to entry. You have to play a campaign, so you have to have the same team, or if you're playing it solo, you're going back to the same town every time you play. Miniature assembly is an absolute nightmare for someone like me who doesn't excel at that and doesn't paint at all. But once you get past that and the rule book and everything else, there's just nothing else like it. It is an absolute, it does what it says in the tin, it's a monster of a game. And it's hugely thematic. The artwork is fantastic. And I just love the fact that this was probably the first game of its kind where someone, like an indie designer, just went off and developed the biggest, most unwieldy, gigantic gaming world imaginable, and took maybe 4 years. But when he came back and delivered it, everyone was like, I think, excuse me, my expectations and a lot of other people's were just like, okay, whatever, it's probably not going to be very good. But when it actually proved to be fantastically enjoyable, it was just, it blew everyone away.
I love the town building. I don't like getting murdered by a random lion every time I go out, every time I leave.
Why not?
And when I say random lion, I'm talking about a lion that just like rolls good.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, there is so much. If you roll a one and your head gets ripped off by a passing worm or whatever, there's so much of that. And I think as long as you go in with that expectation, then there's a world of fun to be had with it. And actually, once you get stuck in, the tactical depth of the battles and everything is huge. There's a whole subset of gameplay in terms of preparing for the hunt itself, preparing for the showdown itself, building your technologies for your people, for your town and everything. There's so much going on. And if anything, that's probably the biggest reason it doesn't get to the table as often as it should for me, is because you're like, oh, well, if I get this out, that's going to stay set up for the next week. It's not just something that I'm going to play for a couple of hours and then put away again.
Right. All right, so that was Kingdom Death Monster. So me, funny how like there's big game, little game, little game, whatever. We're keeping it.
Next time I'll stick to the rules, Jason.
All right. My number 2 game is Onirim. I love Onirim. I love the shuffle together game where you just put all 3 expansions, 4 expansions, all 7. Why not? I completely love this game. I cannot believe the app is not updated in over a year with more expansions. It makes me worried that I'm never going to get them. Boo! But there's plenty of episodes where we've talked about Onirim. It's one of the classic games in the solo game. Always very, very high in the top 100 list at the end of the year. So Onirim, that is
the art style.
What's that?
What do you think of the art style?
I love it. Divisive, yes. People are like, oh, what is this craziness? But to me, again, it's like, the Mageling art style, it's not so, even it's the art is okay. It's the color scheme that really kind of tells me I'm in a fairy world, I'm in the Feywild-esque, like just playing with color in the right way can do so much. And what Elise Plessis is doing in Onirim kind of does the same thing. Like, I don't need to know exactly what's happening. It just point me in the right direction and it pulls me, and just I love it, and it just sinks me in. And if I didn't have that art, would I like the game as much? I can honestly say I wouldn't like the game as much. I assuming that you are of a different opinion.
Oh no, I was just genuinely interested to hear what you think. The art style, I think, suits what it is. This sort of dream world, semi-nightmarish kind of thing that you're exploring. But it's, and I did play it. I played it about 20 times when it first arrived, sort of to process it and to get a feel for the mechanics and everything. And then I felt like I'd come to the end of it, even with all the expansion stuff. I didn't feel like one that I really want to play again. But I understand why people are drawn to that. And the fact that it plays in 20 minutes, you can rattle through a game on a break whilst you're waiting for something to start. It's should be valued.
Yeah. When is that game coming from you? We need that quick game from Call or Nothing. You make these big honking games, I can't deal with them.
So we're developing a game, and it's going to be after 1565, called Veil Wraith. And in fact, it's set up on my table. I've been playing it over the past week solidly because it's a design I sort of returned to recently. And it's my version of a game that I would like to play that takes 20 or 30 minutes. Cool. But for me, the difference would be it would have to have amazing art. But then, art is completely subjective, and what I think is great, other people might not. And we're going for a very different direction in the artwork this time. It's going to be black and white, sort of post-apocalyptic end world kind of art. It's very strange, but it plays really quickly, and it's a campaign as well, so you can keep going back to it and keep adding a little bit more each time you go. But yeah, we'll speak about that after 1565.
Yeah, like you could tell that you're a company head of somebody. You're just ready to strike with the next product. Here's some promo. Fantastic. All right, so your number one is either some gonzo game that is completely out of left field or Gloomhaven.
Gloomhaven didn't make it into the list, unfortunately. I was between that and Spirit Island, and I think Spirit Island nudged it out for me in terms of just the accessibility of it. Gloomhaven I love, and again I'm playing it with my with my son, although he's kind of mentally taken a break from it. We've played it for a while. But no, I mean, you'll never have seen this one coming, I don't suppose, but it's Warfighter, the Special Forces card game.
Wow. Yes, like I told you, Gonzo game from left field. Wow.
So this is a game about, I don't even know when it came out, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I was designing a game, and it was based on these war stories that I used to love reading growing up about soldiers up against overwhelming odds, which, of course, ties into 1565 and stuff. But I love the idea of taking a squad of like sort of Navy SEALs or SAS troops and dropping them behind enemy lines and them having to achieve an objective and then get out alive. And I just designed this game called O-Dark 100, or started designing this game, and I got quite far along with it. And then Warfighter, the Special Forces card game, came out, and I played it, and I was like, well, that's the game that I wanted to design.
Yeah.
I ceased work on it, and it comes back to what we were talking about before, about if only design a game if it's not already out there, sort of thing. It filled that need for me. You equip a team, you send them behind enemy lines, you go after an objective, and it's one that gripped me so much. I think it's become one of, if not the most played solo game on my table, outside of ones that I've designed myself. And every time I pick it back up, I have a great time with it, and it captures all those elements of going through and having a thrilling sort of action thrill ride. It just does it really well. The graphics aren't great. In fact, the graphic design is, in some respects, it can be a bit of a barrier. But the gameplay is fantastic, and it speaks to me on a personal level, and just ticks off a lot of boxes of things that I enjoy. Just sort of dice rolling combat games, and part of it being equipping your team before you go on the mission. But it's not really like a clunky thing where you're going to build a whole deck of cards. You're literally just handing out guns and grenades and maps or whatever to your squad of special forces, and then sending them in against the mission. It's just it does everything it does perfectly.
You brought it back, Tristan. You gave us you brought it back to card games. Yes. I'm not a war guy. I gotta admit it. I will play a clever war game like your games and some of the others. But Warfighter just never looked like anything. So hearing you talk about it, I might have to take a look.
Cool.
All right. So my number one, no surprise if anybody knows me, Race for the Galaxy. Oh, love Race for the Galaxy. Love it solo. Love it multiplayer. Love expansions. There's actually new Race for the Galaxy coming in the Xeno Invasion thing, I think, later in the year. Love it. Did a whole episode on it. Did a whole kind of improve your play for strategy of it. Oh man, just Race for the Galaxy will not. I doubt that will be overtaken in terms of a engine building combo-licious card game. Love it.
Love it. Never played it solo.
It's the bot is definitely an old bot. You lay down the first expansion, which was a 2006, 7, somewhere around there, somewhere before the 2010s, and it feels like an old bot. There's definitely been evolution in the solo, in solo design since then. So I'll wonder what Tom Lehman would do with that now, or maybe he's just kind of moved on to other things. But I love cards. Obviously, with the way I styled the list, oh my God. Anyway, so I'm actually going to rush into that last part because I know we're going very, very long in terms of the gaming portion of the show. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the preview we did for 1565 St. Elmo's Pay. Gone through the top 10 list. Got a sense for what Tristan likes, his influences in terms of how he crafts his game. The games that kind of are in his mind or in the back of his mind when he's designing stuff. So Tristan, thank you so much for sharing that, and the project hopefully will be launching pretty soon, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. We're trying to line up all our ducks and get the advertising and everything ready. But the game is good to go. The artwork is almost entirely complete. So just really excited to hit go on it and follow up 1066 Days to Many Mothers with a game that's going to hopefully do as well as that game did.
Absolutely. All right, so we are going to conclude the gaming portion of this podcast. The rest of this podcast is going to be some geek out, historical context stuff. So if you're not interested in that, then go ahead and tune in next week for more games that we've played post GenCon and post S and all that kind of thing. All right, so let us get into the historical background of 1565. So my approach to history is I tend to be, because I was a high school teacher, so I tend to kind of think in like the kind of big concepts, right? Big themes and sweeps and like what was happening when this particular thing was happening. So when I found out that you wanted to talk about year game, 1565, I'm like, okay, what was happening? Why that period? Why does that make sense? So a couple things are happening. So, I mean, we're in Europe, and St. Elmo is on the island of Malta.
Yes.
Okay, so the Malta is a very, very small island. The only reason gamers would know Malta is because Rado lives there now. When you visited Malta, did you see Rado?
I didn't. I don't know if he was there at that time, but and in fact, all of this came to me a long time after Malta, because 1066 came about before that. But I did pick up on a little bit of the history whilst I was there, and a little bit of the battle, and it struck me that the Siege of Malta was very much like the Battle of Thermopylae, in 300, the movie, or the graphic novel, of just this small outpost of soldiers up against an overwhelming armada of troops, and how they managed to survive and swing that, and basically stop what would have been the Ottoman Empire sweeping through the whole of southern Europe.
Right.
It spoke to me on a fundamental level. It's one of those battles like all of the like the Battle of Hastings, like in 1066. In 1565, it could have gone either way, and the fate of Europe would have been entirely different if it had a different outcome. Mm-hmm. So I read a couple of history books about it, a couple of historical novels about the battle, and it was one of those stories that wouldn't go away. It was sort of scratching around in my head for the longest time. And after I designed 1066, the question came up about what are the battles to cover, and I had a list that I was going through. One of them was going to be Agincourt, but it was the French versus the English again. I didn't want people to think that had like something stuck in my craw about like French. Another and of course these might be future titles. One of them was going to be Sir Francis Drake against the Spanish Armada. Yep. But then the more I looked into the Siege of Malta, and the more I read about it, the more I realised that it just had the scope, and it just felt like the thing that I was most passionate about, the story that I was most passionate about exploring. And once the finding out about the three frontiers that it was fought over, the three outposts and everything just started to come together about how easily it would fit the system that I designed for 1066 Tears to Many Mothers.
So, I mean, when you talk about like the fate of Europe is, turned to this one battle, like, historians kind of argue about it, but it really was kind of a critical turning point time in European history. So in 1512, Martin Luther nails the Protestant 95 Theses on, I think it's like a church in Wittenberg or something like that. And so kicking off the Protestant Reformation. So Christendom, the big Christian empire in Europe that has reigned for 1,000 years, is like the bells are tolling, and people are wondering, it's like, okay, what is happening to Europe at this time? Because you have this discontent with the Catholic Church, which is seen as corrupt and just not a good actor. The previous century, you had this multiple popes and popes kidnapping each other. So like, what is, like, people are kind of wondering what's happening with Christendom. And at this very time, there is a new empire, the Ottoman Empire. It has just, started. I mean, we talk about like kind of the Arabs and, that whole area of the world, but the Ottoman Empire was different, and it was new, and it was young and vigorous, and it had, if you've played any Civ game whatsoever that represents the Ottomans, you're going to get Suleiman the Great. You know who that is. He's probably barked at you during your Civ game to trade him more wheat and more. But at this very moment, that leader in the world, and he really was one of the great kind of, it facilitated expansion. At one point, the Ottoman Empire controlled territory worth 25 million people, which is a huge swath of land for one empire to cover, had conquered the Byzantines, which is the Greek Empire, and they're ascendant. And there was real worry in Europe that the Ottomans would just kind of keep coming. And they didn't make any secret about that. They said, they're kind of putting out there like, okay, you guys are next. So they're coming. And so what's happening? So Christendom is kind of like being assaulted. And also, along with the idea of Christendom is the kind of like old school kind of crusades, orders and knights, and that stuff is still there. So when we're talking the Siege of Malta, we're talking the Knights of St. John, which is a Crusader era order. And they'd gotten beat by the Ottomans. Like they were at the island of Rhodes, which is near Greece, which is actually a nicer, bigger place for them to be. They got beat by the Ottomans, and they went to Malta just because they had no choice. Like Malta was a rock at that point. Nobody did want to be there. So they're like, all right, well, this is the best we can do. So they hunker down and they did what knights do, which is, kind of make the best of the situation. And then, the Ottomans are looking for ways to kind of expand, and they already kicked their butts once. So it's like, all right, well, we're going to have to finish the job over here. And a bunch of other historical things happen. I'm kind of obviously making things simple. So just to kind of set the scene for what Tristan is talking about, where this was a really dramatic moment. So this was like, they'd already gotten their butts kicked and they were outnumbered crazy amount. What I have the numbers here. So like you had 6,100 knights, give or take, on the defending the entire land of Malta. And I'm sure it's talking about these 3 forts, right? So then they're up against an estimated army of 40,000, and 6,100 versus 40,000 doesn't usually go very well. That is not a battle. So it just ups the stakes on what Tristan is talking about in terms of like why this is important. So like, okay, so the Ottomans are, they're branching out and they've decided that, okay, this is going to be our entry. Once we get a foothold on Malta, it's right below Italy. We can launch into Italy from there. And that was the fear, right? And Italy, what's in Italy? The seat of Christendom. So if the Ottomans are at the doorstep right there, they could just launch in and, basically rip out the decaying heart of Christendom, and who knows what's going to happen from there. So that's kind of the theory. That's what's going on. So obviously you're going to get some argument about that. Historians love to argue about everything. But this is a big deal. So that's the backdrop behind what's happening. And then we get to the actual battle. So then let's kind of break down a little bit. I don't want to go into too much detail, but like a little bit of what exactly is happening on those like days, before and during the actual siege.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you've got a brilliant overview of the lead up to the battle there, and of course, Suleiman the Magnificent was in a line of sultans whose expansion plans were as unstoppable as the empire itself. They would basically, each sultan would build their palace from the palace would be built from the funds, from the plunder that they got during their reign. The battle with the knights, because he'd beaten them at Rhodes and driven them off to Malta. It was like, for him, it was a point of pride that he had to wipe them out off the face of the earth, and that's why he'd sent such a massive armada. It was to teach them a lesson and to finish them off for good, because in the intervening period, the Knights of St. John, based on Malta, were effectively pirates. They were just raiding and pillaging every single passing ship from the Turkish Empire and seizing them, and there was slavery on both sides. The actual fuel for these ships going around the Mediterranean was humans, and it was humans that they'd taken either that the Turks had raided from Europe, or that the Maltese and the Europeans had raided from Africa, or the Turks themselves, and so the principal players, or the leaders on both sides, Jean de la Valletta, who was the leader of the Maltese forces, had been a galley slave, and Dragut, or Turgut Reis, who was he was like the leader of the Turkish Armada. He'd also been a galley slave, and they'd been exposed to these conditions, these awful conditions of rowing for 20 hours solid. And so the final straw came about when an agent of the Knights of St. John, Mathurin Romagas, had raided a ship too far, and he took the Sultana, which was like this huge statesman's warship that had the governor of, I think it was either Cairo or Algiers, and it had the babysitter of the Sultan's daughter on board. And he basically captured these key sort of characters, and so Suleiman said, enough is enough, we're going to wipe that island out, off the face of the earth, and the siege began. And so when the Maltese Armada turned up, when the Turkish Armada turned up, the Maltese had already been preparing the defences for like the whole year, and it was over these three forts. You mentioned St. Elmo's, the other two were St. Michael and St. Angelo, and they're sort of on three promontories in the Bay of Malta. And when this gigantic sort of 120 galley, 40,000 strong, or 30,000 strong, depending on which historian you read.
Yeah, there's a lot of different numbers there.
When this giant army started unrolling, it was just unlike anything they'd ever seen. And so to effectively get the ships into the harbour at Malta, the fort of St. Elmo was on a mountain called Mount Sybaris, which overlooked the bay, and it had cannons up there which could freely fire onto the incoming Ottoman ships.
And so that's really important. Like in 1066, they didn't have cannon fire.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that was the big kind of technological innovation that, like, you don't have guns yet. I don't think. They're not proliferating, or muskets and stuff. Like, if you fight a war in 1500s, you're fighting with cannon fire, and there were nothing but cannonballs flying all over the place.
That's right.
And it's almost like the true part is, I mean, it's not incidental, but it really is a bunch of people trying to position themselves to optimize cannon fire. And then when it came down to it, there was big melees, and they were still fighting swords and the melee weapons of the day. But that's really important to kind of note, because when you go to Malta, and I've never been, but I've seen pictures. I'm really interested in this stuff. That's what you're going to see. There's balls and holes and all that stuff.
And the Ottomans had taken with them an inconceivable amount of ammunition. It was something like 100,000 cannonballs and 2,000 tons of gunpowder, and they were ready for a prolonged siege, and probably they were ready to take Malta and then jump off from there and head into Europe. There was, in their minds, there was no concept of being stopped or held up for any length of time by these three little forts with, it was 500 knights, I think, was the actual number of knights, and the rest, the other sort of 5,000 or 6,000 defensive forces were mostly the people of Malta. There was a few hundred sort of enlisted soldiers, but it was the men, women, and children of Malta defending their own island, basically. Mm-hmm. So when they rolled in, their first port of call was to gather around St. Elmo's and just pound it with cannon fire until the reasoning being, if they took St. Elmo's, they could see over the bay. They had command over the bay. The ships could come in and they could pound the other two lower promontories, St. Michael's and St. Angelo, at their leisure. But the problem was, because St. Elmo's was at the top of this mountain, getting to it was hugely difficult, and they hadn't realised on the defences that the knights had prepared, and they had, like I said, they had a year to gather ammunition, supplies, water, food and medicines and everything else.
Yeah, and that's kind of a historical quirk where you see these big turning point battles, and it was a quirk that the knights were kicked out of Rhodes, and then the Maltese attack didn't happen until 10 years later. So it's what are you waiting for? Just go. They're there. Yeah. Go.
It was. I mean, there was a huge gap in between, because when Rhodes is just off the coast, or was just off the coast of the Ottoman Empire. So when they were raiding there, they were the thorn in the side of Suleiman and the Ottomans. But the siege of Rhodes took place in 1515, so it was actually 50 years earlier. And
my God, yeah.
When Suleiman turned up to the island, he was I think he was about 25 years old. So he was out to prove himself. And actually, when he defeated the knights there, it ended honourably. The knights at Rhodes ran out of ammunition, and so they had to give up. So he basically shook their hands and said, you fought really well, and it was very similar to the Siege of Malta in many respects, in terms of the overwhelming odds and that. But the Ottomans cleared them out. He shook hands with the commander and sent them on the way, and put them in a boat and said, "You fought bravely, off you go," kind of thing. So when they relocated to Malta, it was out of his mind for the longest time. But over those intervening decades, the Knights of St. John proved to be these irrepressible pirates, basically, in his mind, who were just raiding his ships constantly. And so when it came back around to Malta all these years later, it was a much more personal vendetta, because he no longer considered them to be fighting with honour, and his leader that he sent in, Mustafa Pasha, was known for his cruelty and his unstoppable sort of nature. So it was there was a different level of bitterness, and that was proven at St. Elmo. So over weeks and weeks, the Turks were pounding the walls of St. Elmo's with these cannonballs and flattening it. And then every time they sent the Janissaries in to charge in, the Knights popped up from nowhere. And in their minds, they must have levelled the fort and killed everyone in it. But these Knights just kept popping back up and repelling them and pushing them back. And one of the main reasons for this is that at night, the other two forts were sending supplies over secretly in the middle of the night. They were ferrying out new soldiers and bringing back the injured, so that they were treating the injured and then sending them back over and reinforcing them without the Ottomans realising. So every time they thought they were destroying these beleaguered Knights, they were suddenly faced with fresh troops and Greek fire and cannonballs and everything else. And they were
It's like home field advantage, right? So like you look at the modern time, the U.S. is in the war with Afghanistan. We've been in there for like 17 years. Why? Yeah. We should sweep them away, But what's happening is you have the U.S. forces are fighting, and then fighting the Taliban. Taliban can just disappear in the mountains of Pakistan and reprovision and train and heal and come back, and they're a fresh fighting force. Obviously, that's over a longer period of time. But when you have home field advantage, you can do stuff like that, so you can face those overwhelming odds.
Absolutely, yeah, and they were taking full advantage of that, and it was a long time before the Ottomans were in a position to deal with that and send ships into the bay to try and prevent it from happening. But taking the fort of St. Elmo's was key to that, and actually, once they had finally pounded it down to the ground and it was on fire and there was no defences left, and the Knights in the fort were sending messages saying, "We need more help," and Jean de la Valette, the Grandmaster of the Knights of St. John, said, "Enough is enough now. We literally can't send anyone else over, because the remaining Knights, such as they are going to have to defend these other two forts." So his whole goal was just for St. Elmo's to just last as long as it could, and for the soldiers there to sell their lives as dearly as possible, and they were basically committed to die. And so the defenders had to come to terms with that. And then once, of course, eventually it was overrun, the passion and the bloodthirst was running so highly that the inhabitants of St. Elmo's, when the Janissaries overtook it, were just butchered to the man almost. I think a handful of survivors got away. But the Knights in particular were targeted by Mustafa Pasha's troops, because he wanted to teach the Order of St. John a lesson. And so all of these the Knights, who were easy to spot because they had these big red surcoats on with a white cross.
Yeah, they don't make a secret of it.
Yeah, and they were like targets, for snipers. But they were easy to identify, and so they found these guys, they tortured them, they did horrible things to the bodies, decapitated them, crucified the bodies, and sent them across the water, these mutilated corpses. And it was to send a clear message that if you carry on resisting, this is what's going to happen to you. But of course, when these bodies washed up at the other two forts, these were their brothers, fathers, and sons and friends of the Knights at the other two outposts, and instead of sort of capitulating, they doubled down and said, well, if that one fort has resisted, with just a couple of hundred guys, and they've killed thousands of Ottomans at this point, over the course of the siege, then if they can do that, then we can resist. And so, as the Ottomans finished taking St. Elmo's, they regathered the forces and they brought them back down the mountain to fight the final two promontories at Birgu and Senglia.
Oh, you missed the most interesting part. How Jean de Villet like decapitated his prisoners of war and put their heads in cannons and fired them back to the Ottomans.
Okay, well, I mean, we're laughing at it, but yeah, the brutality, like the slavery, it was an ugly battle.
Yeah.
It was rife on both sides, and he took, so as soon as these bodies washed up on the shore, he took all the Turkish prisoners out and beheaded them, and as you say, just fired these cannonballs of heads over, and though, all of these events are represented in the game, there each is a card, a pitiless butchery card or a human head bombardment card.
Really? You have a human head bombardment card?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a one shot, I assume.
It is. It's a one shot event, and it's a biological weapon. One of the
can't believe that.
Because I mean that was a tactic during those times, was to try and infect the enemy as well by firing diseased bodies over in catapults and everything. It was the ugly, horrific conflict. So as you say, that blood was running high on both sides, and when the Ottomans came down to continue the siege to the other two outposts, they attacked at Senglia and were given misinformation by a Greek corsair called Candelissa, who told them that there was a breach in the walls and to charge this breach, but there was no breach. So you had thousands of Ottomans charging against a completely impassable wall and then being burnt with Greek fire, shot with muskets and routed effectively and chased back into the French Creek, into the sea. And as they were chased into the sea, the Maltese who had routed them were slitting the throats and stabbing the backs and chanting St. Elmo's Pay. And it's an expression that the Maltese used to today. It just means no mercy. And of course it was their revenge for what had happened at the fort. And that's where we get the title of the game, St. Elmo's Pay. And that's not even half of the tale. It goes on then, the battle.
Yeah, we could go on. It's not a history podcast. We are amateurs over here, but...
But yeah, I mean, it continued for weeks after that, and there were so many moments where the battle could have gone either way. Mustafa Pasha organised an attack of 12,000 of his men to attack both forts at the same time, and as he did so, he basically emptied the Ottoman base camp of all of the fighting men that he could to attack these frontiers, not knowing that there was a tiny cavalry force of 100 Maltese soldiers who was patrolling the outback, basically, the Badlands and everything, and picking off Turkish stragglers where they could. And these cavalry saw their opportunity to charge into the Ottoman base camp and set fire to it and destroy all the supplies, kill all the wounded, take out all the sentries, burn all the food. And so as this giant 12,000 strong army was attacking the forts, they saw behind them this huge smoke cloud, and they thought that reinforcements had landed from Europe, this was a constant threat throughout the siege, was that all the European kings and queens were going to get their acts together and send over reinforcements to the Maltese. And so this was like a timer, a countdown for Mustafa Pasha to achieve his objectives. So when this huge plume of smoke rose out of their base camp, they thought that was it, they've arrived. So they charged back and were routed. But in effect, they were routed. 12,000 men were routed by the actions of this tiny handful of cavalry, who then just disappeared back into the undergrowth again. And those moments happened throughout the battle, and so I've tried to sort of crowbar all of them that I can into the game in some way, and it's been fantastic, sort of trying to do it justice, and cover all the different elements and all the different characters that were present at the battle.
It just makes the game much more rich when you just know that underpinning, It's like you play a Lord of the Rings game. It's more satisfying when you know who Tom Bombadil is, and you know all these, like to know the underpinnings of it. And when it comes to one of these little war games, like you see a card that says Barrage of Heads. It doesn't make much sense, but then the context of it, the human drama behind it. This person had just seen their, like you said before, their sons, their fathers crucified and floating in the river or floating in the bay. And what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
And it just makes games like this so much more alive. And I love the chance to kind of talk with you about this stuff and how much you kind of steeped in this stuff. Obviously, the history stuff is pretty fun to me. So I mean, man, I really can't wait to get this game to the table. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to get it out there, and it's been so much fun. Just burying my head in books and that being a part of my job. To just keep and
I'm doing research, honey.
But it is. I mean, you find out about these moments, and they make the hairs on your arms stand on end. And you're like, that's going to be. Maybe there's a way I can use it mechanically in the game, or that's the title for the game. And I buzz off this in the same way that I do off fantasy or science fiction. It's a fantastic part of our history, and to even shed the tiniest light on it through a card game, it's an honour. It's brilliant. It's and talking to people at conventions about it and stuff, and seeing their eyes light up because they've got a passing interest in the Saxons or the Normans or or Malta or any of these conflicts.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, this is huge in Maltese history, I mean, eventually the reinforcements came, and eventually it took a while. And Turkey was beaten back, and that it was almost like the turning point for them more than it was a turning point for Europe, because this is it. This was their first major defeat, and it kind of broke the spell of the perceived, when a team has momentum. It's like they seem unstoppable, what's going to happen next? But when they suffer a grievous defeat like that, where they marshal so many forces and they can't even beat this little rock, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, we're in a different spot, and history kind of goes on from there. And what's the capital city of Malta called now?
Valletta, of course. And I didn't know that walking around it. I didn't realise it was named after the Grandmaster who defended it. It was, they absolutely, all of the Maltese people owed their lives to the knights, and the knights to the Maltese people, because they fought down to the last man, woman and child, and there are reports of the women and children on the battlements throwing rocks down, and pouring boiling oil on the enemy. And at one point, the Ottomans were so frustrated in not being able to take these final two forts that they sent a detachment of 4,000 troops to the capital city, as it then was, which was the capital city, Medina. They sent 4,000 troops up to the capital to try and take that, so they could at least report back and say, we've got something. But when these 4,000 troops turned up at Medina, they saw troops lined up all along the battlements in battle dress, and they unloaded cannons at them before they were even in range. And they thought, wow, if they're that heavily defended, and if they've got that much ammunition, that there's no point even trying to take them. We'll just go back. So they went back and retreated and carried on the siege. And what had actually happened was the knights at Medina had lined the battlements with women and children and put them in soldiers' outfits. When they fired their opening salvo, which wasn't even in range, they emptied all of their
That was it.
They had no more. But it was just on that one chance opportunity that they might convince them that, look how powerful we are. And if they'd have carried on going, of course, they would have taken the city. But there were moments like that throughout the entire siege, and it's a real, the history reads like a thriller, like this rip-roaring sort of adventure that goes back and forth. And every time that the Maltese are about to go under, they win something back impossibly against the odds, and it's and likewise, with the Turks doing the same. It's just, it goes backwards and forwards all the way through, and results eventually in them holding out just for long enough to, as you say, Don Garcia's relief force to arrive from Europe, and it ignites. At that point, you were talking about the momentum of a team. It ignites the whole of Europe, because they're like, this unstoppable Ottoman Empire can be defeated. And so, sure enough, they get their arses into gear and put together an armada led by Don Juan, and they take this armada to the Mediterranean. And this would be another game in itself. It could be is the Battle of Lepanto, when this gigantic armadas on either side, the forces that had never been seen like in this sort of scale before, went to war in the Mediterranean, and the Ottomans were beaten back then as well, which was kind of the sort of decisive final blow that kept them out of Europe. But it's all of the sort of outlying events that lead to this like gigantic conclusion to an ongoing conflict. But it all hinges on what would have happened at Malta, and it's such a fantastic tale.
All right, so we are going to tell more fantastic historical tales, or Tristan is. I'm not going to do these things. All right, next time you design one of these games and we have another historical geek out, I'm more than welcome.
Brilliant.
This has been too much fun. I imagine you don't get a chance to do this a lot on other podcasts.
Not at all. No.
Tristan, this has been 2 hours on a Sunday morning / afternoon. It has flown by, but I feel the call. My wife is like, "What are you doing down there? Get up here."
Thanks,
my friend.
Thanks so much for your time, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Good luck with everything. Good luck with the project and everything moving forward. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks again.